um, refer back to. I am Ashley. I'm the coach success manager here with CoachRx and OPEX Fitness. I'm also a CCP coach. My husband and I actually are also gym owners. We own OPEX Round Rock in Texas. So everybody here is a coach and a part of our community. Today we are going to dig into a topic that I'm very excited to learn about. Haley and I were just chatting about how it's such a complex topic, and it's something that I think all of us are experiencing as coaches. We're starting to see more and more women going through every phase of life. We were just talking about how women are just very complex in general when it comes to their health and their wellness and the way their bodies change. So I think this is something that everybody is interested in learning about, and we're super excited to have Haley present to us today about coaching considerations for perimenopause and menopause, because I'm sure many of you have or are currently working with clients like this. If you are working with clients right now who are in perimenopause or menopause, will you drop that in the chat just so we kind of get an idea of what your experiences are? And then also throughout the Haley's presentation, if you guys have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that for her so we can kind of just ask and answer questions throughout. But I am going to introduce Haley and then let her get started. So Haley is owner of OPEX Regina I always murder it, so I'm just going to say Canada because I'm not even going to try and pronounce exactly where in Canada. And then she's also a women's health coach. So she's been taking a lot of courses specifically on women's health, perimenopause, and menopause. So I'm going to hand it off to her to kind of introduce herself, and then we'll get started on her presentation.
Thank you very much, Ashley. So as she said, my name is Haley. I am from Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I am co-owner of OPEX Fitness Regina, which is, I own with Steve Volke. I know most of you know Steve or have worked with Steve before. I am a certified women's health and menopause coaching specialist, a kinesiology graduate, OPEX CCP level 1 certified, and I've been co-owner of OPEX Regina for 10 years now. Can I get started?
Yeah, go ahead and start sharing.
Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can. You're good.
Great. Okay, so today we're going to go over the 5 coaching considerations for perimenopause and menopause. We're going to go over 5 very specific topics. Let's see. Okay, we're going to go through pelvic floor strengthening, common training concerns, exercise selection, bone health, and metabolic health specifically. So I've already mentioned, I'm Haley. I help women navigate midlife with tailored exercise, nutrition, and education. I specialize in perimenopause and postmenopause, so I can support women in this new phase of life. My own challenges with my body is kind of what inspired me to start creating a program and educating myself on this transition so that I could confidently coach my clients and help them through this new phase of life. I'm just gonna see here if I can pull. Oh, that's okay. All right, so a few important notes to start. Women actually have 3 types of estrogen in their lifetime. So they go through different phases of life and require different types of estrogen to help support their system. So the first kind of estrogen is estrone. During menopause, this is the estrogen that dominates. It's a weak form of estrogen and is produced primarily by adipose tissue and remains localized in the body. The second kind of estrogen is estradiol. This is the estrogen that premenopausal, non-pregnant women have as their primary hormone. It maintains ovulation, and this is the estrogen that everybody talks about in perimenopause. The last kind of estrogen is estriol, and this estrogen is only produced during pregnancy and helps maintain the placenta. So it's really important, and I find it important to talk to my clients that there are 3 types of estrogen, and depending on what phase of life they're going through, these are the ones that dominate. Estrone, the one that takes over in postmenopause, is an important one to mention to clients because it's a weaker form of estrogen, and most think that they just don't have any estrogen left. It doesn't have the same protective effects as estradiol, but differentiating between the two with clients, I believe, is very important so that they're educated when they want to go talk to a health professional. It's also important to note that there are 4 different phases in a woman's life and during their life cycle. So women who are of reproductive age, who have gone through puberty and are not perimenopausal, are actually in premenopause. Women that are starting to experience symptoms, which can happen as soon as age 35, are in perimenopause. And women that no longer have a period are in postmenopause. When we talk about menopause specifically, we are only talking about a single day in a woman's life. So menopause is not actually a phase of a woman's life that they go through for very long. They only experience menopause for 1 day. Menopause is specifically characterized by an entire calendar year without a period. So if a woman has a period after 11 months of not having one, she is not considered in menopause or post-menopause. So the language around the different phases of a woman's life are sometimes misused or misconstrued. And menopause is often used as a blanket term for women and a long period of time in a woman's life when it's actually only realistically 1 day. So I just want to make sure that that's clear and moving forward that you have the right language to speak to your clients about. So first topic that I want to go through is pelvic floor function and strengthening. This is a very complex topic. I'm going to do my best to summarize as much of it as I can in the time that I have. And I've also included 3 specific exercises that you can use with your clients in order to help them better understand how to feel their pelvic floor and use their pelvic floor properly. When I share my screen, I can't see anybody, so I feel like I'm talking to myself. Okay, so the first basics of the pelvic floor anatomy and functions. We actually have 3 layers of our pelvic floor. We have the urogenital triangle, the urogenital diaphragm, and the deep pelvic floor. So the urogenital triangle is the most superficial layer of the pelvic floor, and its role isn't very well known or researched, but they do say that it likely plays a role in sexual function and supports the pelvic floor muscles. The second layer, the urogenital diaphragm, sits in the middle and includes the internal urethral and anal sphincter, and it helps control continence. So if these muscles are not working properly, women are likely having trouble starting the flow of urine and feces. And the last layer of the pelvic floor, the deep pelvic floor, this is the layer that most people talk about. This is the one that's most widely known. These muscles work together with the surrounding fascia and connective tissue to lift and support the pelvic organs, preventing prolapse, and they contribute to maintaining urinary and anal continence. So when I talk about prolapse, if anybody doesn't know what that is when the internal organs start to protrude into the vaginal canal or come out of the vaginal canal. So the structure of the pelvic floor has given way and the internal organs are actually starting to protrude. which I will go over in more detail in a bit. Our pelvic floor has 4 basic functions: constricting the urethra, vagina, and anal canal, supporting the pelvic organs, helping stabilize the trunk, and helps regulate intra-abdominal pressure. So the last 2 are the ones that we use the most in the gym when we talk about using our pelvic floor for support. When we don't have the proper support, a lot of women have trouble stabilizing their core, and they have trouble regulating that intra-abdominal pressure, or that bracing technique that a lot of us talk about with our clients. So stabilizing the trunk, the pelvic floor muscles respond to the load that's placed on them. When standing relaxed, the pelvic floor actually always has a resting tone. So the integrity and tone of our pelvic floor is really important, because this is what helps women stop from peeing their pants or having any leak of feces. Helping regulate intra-abdominal pressure, as I've already mentioned, stabilizing the spine, and stabilizing the pubic symphysis joint and the SI joints. But the pelvic floor doesn't work alone. The transverse abdominal muscles in the pelvic floor are nearly active in every single activity that we do. When we're lifting something heavy, the pelvic floor actually escalates in response to that. And the contractions of the pelvic floor should be appropriate for the load that's being moved. So one of the best examples that I've ever heard is having somebody stand and brace really, really hard, like you're super tight in brace, and then you go and push them. They're actually not going to be very stable because they're overdoing the amount of bracing that they need. If you have somebody stand really relaxed, as you already know, you go over and try to push them over, they're not going to be very stable either. So finding the appropriate amount of stability is really important, not only for our whole entire body, but for our pelvic floor. So we don't want to place too much tension or not enough tension on it in order to maintain its integrity. Some women, however, have a higher resting tone in their pelvic floor naturally. This can and cannot be problematic. It depends on the woman. This is actually called, someone who has a tight pelvic floor, it's actually called a hypertonic pelvic floor. And this can increase issues of incontinence, pain, and sexual dysfunction. Having a hypertonic pelvic floor doesn't only happen to women who've had children, it can happen to anybody. I do find a lot of my clients who have a hypertonic pelvic floor seem to have leaking, not when it's urgent. So when they're jumping, they have some tailbone pain. They might even have a little bit of low back pain. And a lot of it is caused from stress. We get really tight and stressed, just like when our traps raise up to our ears. The same thing can happen with our pelvic floor. So it's really important that we can educate our clients on how to make the brain pelvic floor connection in order to relax. So some of the changes during perimenopause and menopause with the pelvic floor. As you probably already know, during perimenopause, estrogen declines. So that E2 estrogen is what starts to decline. And estrogen actually we have receptors everywhere in our body for estrogen, which lead to a lot of protective effects, and that protect us from a lot of disease, tissue disintegration, etc. So this decline in estrogen leads to shrinking of the uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries, and it makes our muscles and connective tissues less resilient. So after menopause, the uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries actually shrink. Muscles and connective tissues become less resilient, which means we have less support for our bladder, uterus, vagina, and rectum. The organs can sag downwards, creating a sensation of heaviness or pelvic pressure, which can also lead to prolapse of the organs. That's when the organs descend through the vaginal cavity or bulge out of the vagina. One of the most common syndromes that a lot of women experience when they are in perimenopause or they are premenopausal, perimenopause, is genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So 84% of women who are postmenopausal, no longer have a period, experience GSM, and 19% of premenopausal or perimenopausal women have GSM. So GSM is a chronic and progressive condition that affects the female genitourinary tract, including the bladder, urethra, external genitalia, pelvic floor tissues, and vagina. So some of the symptoms that women can experience with GSM would include vaginal dryness, genital burning, sexual dysfunction, pelvic organ prolapse, and urinary dysfunction. As many as 84% of postmenopausal women have this, and most women are too afraid or embarrassed to say anything. So it's really important when we are taking on or working with women who are in perimenopause or postmenopausal to make sure that we're comfortable and open to talking about some of these issues. You most certainly don't have to go into graphic detail with any of them, but giving them an opportunity on your intake form or sitting down and having a very brief conversation on, do you have any of these symptoms? Because it can be quite embarrassing for a lot of women to bring it up. But if you can create that comfortable, open space, it's definitely something worth talking about. And then if you know your stuff and you can recommend that that woman go and seek some help, there is a lot that can be done for this syndrome to make them more comfortable and to be able to function a little bit more normally. So some of the risk factors for GSM include removal of the ovaries that generally sends women into early menopause and then into postmenopause, alcohol consumption, smoking, lack of exercise, cancer treatment, and the absence of vaginal childbirth. So some of the treatments that women can seek for GSM include non-hormonal vaginal lubricants, vaginal estrogens. So you can actually get an estrogen cream that can be used externally, systematic hormone therapy or hormone replacement therapy. There is a lot of new research on HRT that has come to the conclusion that it's not as bad for women as they once thought. And the longer a woman has estrogen in her body, the longer and healthier she will live. So I think there was a study done that said that a woman on HRT and that does it at the right time could add up to 2 years onto her life because she maintains the protective effects of estrogen. You can also go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist if they are having troubles with their pelvic floor tissues or with prolapse, and laser therapy can also help. So what can you do as a coach to help with pelvic floor issues or GSM? Make sure you're always conducting a pelvic health screen. Now it's out of our scope to be able to do any extensive screening. They would have to go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist for that. But we can definitely have those conversations, like I mentioned, to make sure that we're screening for risk factors and pelvic floor symptoms. At OPEX Regina, in our intake form, we actually include a large section at the bottom. It's labeled for females, and we have a ton of questions about pelvic floor health. If they've had children, what kind of birth experience have they had? If they've used forceps or suction to help deliver the baby, they are more prone to having pelvic floor issues afterwards because it wasn't a natural birth. It's quite traumatic for the pelvic floor. Make sure that you're being very professional. Don't be afraid to talk about it. I've sat down with a lot of women over the last 5 years who've said, I can't believe how open you are about these topics. You just bring it up like nothing. That's how it should be. I don't want them to be embarrassed, nor do I need to be embarrassed to say some of these words or bring up some of these topics. And it's definitely allowed us to provide a more compassionate environment for our clients, especially if they've been seeking help and haven't been able to find it. We also want to encourage healthy nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle practices, which we all do. That is the OPEX way. And that is a major component to maintaining the health of a woman through perimenopause into postmenopause. So most of you are already, I would say 65% of the way there, and you're already doing that. And the last one is to refer out. So if you don't already have a physiotherapy clinic that you work with or have found a pelvic floor physiotherapist, that is a great connection to make for your clients to allow them the confidence to go and see somebody for extra help. And if you can add on to that working directly with that physiotherapist with the client's permission so that you can cut out the middleman. That just creates such a wonderful, well-rounded support for the client where they don't have to go back and forth. They know that they can go to their appointment and they're going to report directly to you so you can incorporate it into their program. Our clients absolutely love that, and we've made several connections over the years to be able to do that. Right. Number 2, we're going to go over some of the common training concerns during perimenopause and menopause. Obviously, reflecting on our already spoken about topic of pelvic floor dysfunction is the number one consideration for women and heavy load and basically any kind of movement pattern that's going to cause extra pressure onto the pelvic floor. So urinary incontinence and pelvic prolapse are big. I would say probably 90% of the women that come to our gym have some sort of incontinence issues. And nearly 30 to 40% of middle-aged women and 50% of postmenopausal women have experienced incontinence. I know a lot of our clients who are over the age of 60 have said that their mom just said this is something that you live with, so I just have to live with it, when in fact they don't have to. There is a lot that can be done for a lot of women with some treatment from a pelvic floor physiotherapist. And some of the simple exercises that I'm going to show here that can be incorporated into their program. So some of the main considerations with pelvic floor is always coach and program for the client that's in front of you. We've gone over NEPA with a lot of our clients, and I know that that is a big one. I got an email a couple of weeks ago from OPEX on that one. We always want to be noticing, prescribing, and actioning with our clients. And sometimes with women who have pelvic floor and prolapse issues, it's a day-to-day thing. One of the biggest things that I recommend and a good technique is to give your client a this or that option. If you're feeling and your prolapse is not great today, instead of doing this, let's work on that. It gives them the option to choose based on how they're feeling. It gives them a lot more autonomy, but it also allows them to stay consistent. So there are 2 kinds of incontinence that women can experience. We have stress incontinence and urge incontinence. Stress is due to the rise of intra-abdominal pressure, like jumping rope, box jumps, lifting something heavy, heavy back squats, deadlifts, etc. And then we have urge incontinence, which is an involuntary loss of urine during a sense of urgency. So the woman already really has to go to the bathroom, but they just can't quite make it because their pelvic floor won't allow them to do so. Pelvic organ prolapse is when one or more of the pelvic organs descends toward or through the opening of the vagina. It becomes more common in postmenopause because of the decline in estrogen integrity of the pelvic floor tissues. Some of the hallmark symptoms of prolapse, if you think your client might be experiencing it and you want to have a conversation or just kind of educate them and make them aware, feeling of a lump or a bulge in the vagina, having tissues actually fully protrude out of the vagina, trouble emptying their bladder all the way. This one can be a little bit confusing for clients because prolapse can cause that, and a pelvic floor that's too tight can actually cause trouble emptying the bladder, and some low back pain. A tight pelvic floor can also cause low back pain, so that's why it's so important to send women to be assessed properly so that they know which one is the issue. So what can you do with pelvic floor? Be compassionate and comfortable talking about it. A proper screening intake again. And there's a few programming decisions that you can make that can help give women more autonomy and allow them to be successful with training. Reduce the load on exercises, decrease the range of motion. So we have a lot of women at our gym that have pelvic prolapse. So instead of doing a full goblet squat, they actually squat to a box, and the box height will change day to day based on how they're feeling and what their symptoms are like. You can change the form of the exercise as well. A slightly wider stance sometimes opens up the pelvic floor a little bit to give them better range of motion. Reducing impact. Some women may be okay doing box jumps one day, but then the next day they have to revert to step ups because it's just a little bit more comfortable. We can reduce sets or reps, increase our rest periods, change equipment. So maybe one day we're barbell back squatting, but that's not feeling good. So we're going to change to a dual dumbbell front rack squat. And then we can also work on breathing and bracing techniques and strategies to help. So some of those bracing strategies include not gripping with the upper abs too much. So really tightening and kind of trying to suck in during a movement can cause some issues and too much pressure on the pelvic floor. So you want to make sure that she can breathe relatively normally and have a conversation during her movement if she's having a high symptomatic day. You can cue her upwards from the bottom. So as they're coming out of their movement, you can actually have them think about drawing their pelvic floor up slightly. You only want about a 30% contraction. You don't want to go too hard, but you can almost use the analogy of lifting the pelvic floor like they're trying to pull a Kleenex out of the Kleenex box. So drawing upwards can help with more support and can help alleviate symptoms. You can also try changing your breathing technique. Most of the time, what we encourage is an inhale on the way down and an exhale on the hard part of the movement, like a squat. But sometimes different types of breathing patterns work better for different women. So you could try inhaling on the exertion, holding their breath during the exertion, or getting ready for that big brace, filling the diaphragm with air, but then giving just a little puff of air out can help slightly relax the pelvic floor so that we don't have too much pressure on it. This one works really, really well for a lot of women who have incontinence issues. So that big bracing breath in, and then just a little on the way out just to relieve a little bit of the pressure because we don't want to be pushing too much onto the already compromised pelvic floor. You can also experiment with different positions. This is a hallmark and a staple for most of us OPEX coaches. We encourage our clients to do exercises lying on the floor, half kneeling, standing, seated on a bench. So trying different forms of a movement can really give your client the confidence that they need and to stay comfortable while they're completing their exercise. The next one we're going to talk about is musculoskeletal pain. So fluctuating sex hormones may change fluctuating sex hormones may change a woman's perception of pain or how they recover from workouts. As hormones fluctuate in perimenopause and into postmenopause, women actually have more systematic inflammation because the protective effects of estrogen are just not there anymore. So a lot of women might say, I feel a lot more sore after my workouts compared to what I used to. I have more popping, cracking, creaking. My joints just don't feel the same. This is a hallmark symptom of perimenopause and postmenopause if you've ruled out a lot of other things. We do hear this a lot in the gym. Oh, I just think it's my perimenopause. But then we have the conversation, how much protein have you had in the last couple of days? How much water have you had today? Did you sleep okay last night? And they'll say, no, I didn't eat anything yesterday and I had 1 cup of water. We have to make sure that they are educated in the difference between the two. But if they are very consistent with their lifestyle and nutrition habits and they're still having musculoskeletal pain, it's a good indication that it is perimenopause and a hormone shift that's come into play. So some of the things that you can do for musculoskeletal pain is reduce the load, reduce the range of motion, more joint-friendly positions, seated, half kneeling, lying on the floor, and using different equipment. I know a lot of women at our gym love bands, and when they're not feeling great, adding in some banded work can be a nice change for them, but it allows them to continue to be successful. Okay, the last coaching consideration is osteopenia and osteoporosis. So these two are different. Osteopenia is the reduced bone density. So they are not in the T-score of -1 to +1 anymore. they are now a T-score of -1 to -2.5. So osteopenia is the step before being diagnosed with osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is defined as a more severe loss of bone density where your T-score sits between -2.5 or lower. So starting in your mid-40s, women start to lose an average of 0.4% of bone mineral density each year. At ages 50 to 54, around menopause, women experience a sharper rate of decline and losing 4.4% of their bone density each year. So some of the biggest risk factors for women: menopause, so that change in estrogen, low body weight, inadequate nutrition, low levels of physical activity, genetics play a large factor, history of smoking, certain medications, and those medications is prolonged use of corticosteroids and certain medical conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So 27% of women ages 65 plus have osteoporosis, which is wild to me. I work very closely with a nurse practitioner here in the city who does bone scans, and she said the number of women that she has come in who had no idea. They come for a bone scan because it was recommended by their doctor, and they leave with the diagnosis of osteopenia or osteoporosis. She said it's mind-boggling because osteoporosis and osteopenia have no symptoms. It's considered a silent disease because women don't actually experience pain or a change in anything until they actually experience a fracture or they go to the doctor and are recommended to go for a bone scan. So prevention is definitely key. And this is something that's definitely preventable unless it's genetic or tied to a condition that your client already experiences. But it's never too late to start strength training, talking about proper nutrition, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So the best thing that your client can do is go and get screened and get their bone density score and their fracture risk score to see kind of where they're sitting. It's usually an eye opener for a lot of women. I do know my mom's age group, she's in her early 60s. Nutrition was always less is better because that's how you stay small. Once we get into perimenopause and postmenopause, nutrition and exercise are massive. They are a huge part of staying healthy because we just don't have the estrogen in our body anymore to let us get away with the things that we used to do. And that seems to be the hardest sell for a lot of women. You can't really do what you used to do in your 20s and 30s with your nutrition and lifestyle in order to maintain your health and the hormones that you're losing. So the best thing that you can do as a coach when having a conversation around osteopenia and osteoporosis is educate, continue to program those progressive overload workouts. The earlier they start with that, the better. Program high impact exercises if it's appropriate. At the end of the warm up is usually the best place to start helping clients who don't have a lot of experience incorporate those in because they're not tired yet. Clients that have a lot of experience, I mean, if you have some lady in their mid 40s, mid 50s that loves to do CrossFit, has tons of experience with box jumps and skipping. I mean, if she knows how to work at a fatigued state, there's nothing wrong with keeping it where it is. We want to encourage a healthy lifestyle. So quitting smoking, limiting alcohol, and really looking at nutrient, mineral dense foods to help supplement what we're losing into postmenopause. All right, next one, exercise selection. This is not all that different than what everybody is doing already. The way that OPEX is structured and the way that we deliver fitness is almost exactly what should be done for women in peri and postmenopause. We just want to consider the woman's symptoms day to day to ensure that we're taking those into consideration. A lot of the symptoms can cause frustration, fatigue, difficulty completing exercises as written, So as I already mentioned, giving your client a this or that option. I also like to use the RPE scale, rate of perceived exertion scale, for perimenopause, postmenopause symptoms. So if they didn't sleep well one night, I like my clients to look at how they're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. It's nice because they can use it for both. How heavy is the weight? How are you feeling today? They don't have to learn something new. If they're between a 1 and a 4 because they had horrible sleep and feel terrible, maybe not doing the workout written is the best option. Go for a walk and stretch. Maybe having a nap's their best option. If they're between a 5 and a 7, maybe we're changing how many sets, how many reps, and how heavy today just to meet them where they're at. And if they're between an 8 and a 10, as written, have at her, see how you feel as it goes. We can always make changes as needed. So I like being able to use the RPE scale for more than one thing because clients do tend to get confused sometimes when you've got too many things on the go. So exercise selection, movement pattern considerations for perimenopause and postmenopause. As normal, a lot of us program all of these all of the time. The ones that I find the most important is things that help our client work on balance. Balance is a key indication of how someone is aging, and the stronger, more mobile, and the better balance the client has, the more independently they're going to be able to live for longer. So I like to make sure that I'm including from the 7 major movement patterns, the rotation exercises, and then making sure for all of the trunk major movement patterns, I'm trying to include each and every one of those over the 6-week cycle. You're obviously not going to be able to fit absolutely everything into everyone's program if they're coming 3 days a week. But if we can make sure we're focusing on each one of these over the span of the client's 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 18 weeks, etc. And then making sure, and this is a sticking point for a lot of our clients, they either love it or they hate it, including crawling exercises or lying to standing. Turkish get up, 3-point get up. We're doing any kind of crawling, crab walk, etc., to help ensure that they're maintaining those movement patterns that we used to be able to do as children. So if one of our client falls, we want them to be able to have a strategy and the strength to be able to get up off the floor to help themselves. And if you're including that in their strength training program to prevent osteoporosis, you're also going to be helping ward off breaks, falls, and other things that can happen that leave our clients incapacitated. All right, so this is the most important part of the exercise prescription, pelvic floor strengthening exercises. So to start off with, I want all of my clients to be able to complete the connection breath very, very well. This is huge for clients. I'm not going to take too much time because I'm going to leave time for questions, but you have the client place a hand on their ribs and a hand on their lower abdomen, and they are going to practice breathing into their hands while sitting on their sit bones on a hard surface. So I do have a little cheat sheet that Ashley can send out when we're finished that has all of this stuff included. So we want a nice big breath in, and when they're breathing in, you want them to breathe into their hands and imagine they're inflating and expanding their pelvic floor and lifting their vagina and anus by filling it with air. And then when they breathe out or exhale, we want the rib cage and abdomen to deflate. We want to imagine their pelvic floor deflating. And they can shoot for about 30% maximal contraction. They're going to do 8 to 10 of these connection breaths in their warm-up and takes about 2 to 3 minutes. So I have my clients stay here on this exercise for as long as it takes for them to develop a good connection with their pelvic floor. A lot of women have no idea how to connect with the pelvic floor and how to be able to allow it to rise and fall and how to engage it with their entire core. So our pelvic floor is a large integral part of our bracing strategy. So being able to relax and contract the pelvic floor is a massive feat for a lot of women. If they can't get it sitting on the floor, they can try lying down on their back, lying on their side, or on all fours. but working on being able to make that connection can make a massive difference in how they learn to brace during exercises and lift things and move in everyday life. The next one is endurance contractions and strength contractions. So our pelvic floor actually has slow twitch muscles and fast twitch fibers, sorry. So both of them play an integral part in how our pelvic floor functions. The fast twitch muscles usually kick in when we already have to go to the bathroom really bad. And they're like, hey, I'm going to help you out so that you don't pee your pants before you get there. And our slow twitch muscles are the ones that keep the tone of our pelvic floor and help us hold in our feces and urine in the meantime before we have that actual urgency to go to the bathroom. So for the slow twitch contractions, you do 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, 6 to 8 second holds each, and you're going to do it 2 to 3 times a week with your client. It's recommended that you program these in the warm-up so that they have the ability to practice that 30% contraction. And they're going to do this in isolation. So it's very similar to the connection breath, but this time they're actually going to be holding it at a 30% contraction for 6 to 8 seconds and then releasing. So that's why mastering the connection breath is so important to making sure that you can perform the slow twitch exercises properly. The fast twitch contractions or strength contractions, we're going to include on the concentric part of an exercise. You're going to do it with one exercise in every workout, but you're going to want to switch it up so that they're practicing this during a different movement every time. This makes it extremely functional because if they can master how to contract their pelvic floor at a 30 to 50% contraction doing almost anything, they're going to be able to carry that through into their everyday life. So they're going to do 2 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps, and they're going to hold that intense contraction for 1 to 2 seconds. During an exercise, it can be anything, bicep curls, goblet squats, bench press, you name it. Switching it up and getting them to practice is going to be really important. All right, bone health, number 4. So our bone health is closely connected to other organ systems and our lifestyle, including nutrition, exercise, sleep, mineral regulations, cell signaling molecules, sex hormones, and our immune system. So as you notice, the key skills here, excuse me, are not all that different from what we talk about with our clients already. So as I said, the OPEX TCP method and the way that we coach encompasses a lot of this already, which is nice because you don't have to learn a lot of new skills or way to deliver this information. So our bone health responds to how much energy is available. So making sure our premenopausal and postmenopausal clients are eating enough calories every day is so, so, so important, not only for building muscle tissue, but maintaining bone health and our metabolic health. So it's so important to talk to our 40-plus-year-old clients about sufficient energy intake. It can be tough because a lot of them grew up with less is more. But when we get to midlife, eating sufficient nutrients is so important. Bones are also made up of the proteins that we get in our protein, and protein makes up a significant portion of our bone volume. So eating enough protein is linked to maintaining bone density. And then, of course, we want to be eating nutrient-dense foods that are high in calcium. So for those of our clients that don't eat dairy anymore, I also do not consume dairy because it bothers my digestive system. I'm not getting my calcium from my dairy products anymore, so I really have to focus on making sure I'm maintaining my leafy greens. I'm getting calcium fortified foods. Maybe I'm supplementing. But the most bioavailable form of calcium is through our food. And if your client is going to supplement, make sure they talk to their doctor and they're combining the calcium and vitamin D together for the best absorption possible. And then we also want to make sure that our clients are eating enough fiber. Bone mineral density can be improved by short chain amino fatty acids, which our gut bacteria produces when breaking down fiber. So eating enough fiber for a woman who is perimenopausal or postmenopausal is really important, not only for that reason, but also it rids the body of excess hormone. It helps them not feel bloated. And a lot of women could probably eat between 25 and 40 grams of fiber a day, depending on where they're at and what kind of symptoms they have. Right, last one, metabolic health. So metabolic health should not be confused with our metabolism. They aren't one and the same, but they are closely connected. So our metabolic health is our body's effective use of energy and nutrients, how it maintains stable blood sugar and blood pressure. These are all affected by exercise, sleep, and stress. So metabolic health is a very complex topic. There are many factors that contribute to overall metabolic health and hormones. Hormones are a contributing factor of metabolic health, but they are not the only thing that affects metabolic health. This is where a lot of women get confused and they believe that my metabolism and metabolic health and metabolism for most women are one and the same, is affected by my hormone changes, when in fact it is not the only reason why. So making sure they understand it's a contributing factor, but it's not the only reason. So our sex hormones are estradiol, or that E2, progesterone, testosterone, and FSH influence our energy balance, body heat production, insulin sensitivity, glucose metabolism, adipose tissue health, lipogenesis, and losing the protective effects of energy do play a role in fat accumulation. So during menopause, estradiol and progesterone levels go down and FSH levels go up. So women will often notice more fat accumulating around their midsection instead of around their hips and thighs like it did when they were in their 20s and 30s. And when FSH increases, it can increase weight gain and fat gain by inhibiting thermogenesis. So we talk about NEAT a lot with our clients. A lot of that activity is still extremely helpful, but it can, perimenopause and menopause can have an effect on how well it works. So making sure a client understands where that's coming from and that it's not just their metabolism that's the problem. So this means that postmenopause does not necessarily cause weight gain, but is associated with it because of the way our fat distribution changes. Usually through perimenopause and postmenopause, weight gain is usually due to our tendency to move less. And when you're not feeling good and you're having a lot of perimenopausal symptoms, we don't necessarily want to move that often, right? So making sure our clients understand that continuing to exercise and move every single day is going to be the best medicine. Estrogen is when we lose estrogen, our appetite is also affected. So when estrogen is low, leptin is also affected. So a lot of women going into perimenopause and postmenopause might have an increase in appetite. So also making sure that your clients understand that this hormone change can affect your hunger cues. And we want to make sure that we are eating enough protein and enough fiber to make sure you're satiated and we're not grabbing for high sugar options and high carbohydrate options. Menopause also increases anabolic resistance, which means muscles respond less to anabolic signals in the muscles. This means exercise and protein can trigger less protein synthesis, which is what helps us build muscles. So it can be harder for women to build muscle mass in perimenopause and postmenopause. Menopause also increases inflammation and pain perception muscles and connective tissues, and the lower estrogen levels are the culprit. So with the increase in anabolic resistance, we do actually need to eat a little bit more protein as we get older in order to help maintain our protein synthesis. I know most of you already know that, and we've already talked to our clients about that, but being able to connect the two and say, this is what's happening and this is why this is so important. That way they can make the connection and really start understanding why you're telling them to do what they need to do. So metabolic syndrome is a real concern as we get older. Our systems don't work as well due to the loss of estrogen, so it can lead to impaired glucose metabolism, insulin resistance, increase in visceral fat, hypertension, inflammation, oxidative stress, and cardiovascular disease. So what can you do to help your client? And a lot of this comes down to nutrition. So eating nutrient-dense foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, reducing processed foods, and maintaining body composition. Minerals play a key role in metabolic health. Low magnesium is correlated with metabolic syndrome, and selenium helps with regulating glucose metabolism and fat accumulation in the liver. So getting as many of those vitamins and minerals from food is key. Fruits and veggies are huge. Oxidative stress plays a key role in metabolic syndrome. So as many colorful fruits and vegetables as possible because they're rich in antioxidants. Healthy fats like omega-3s, nuts, seeds, olives, and olive oil. They help with the lipid and lipoprotein to help with the synthesis of inflammation-mediating chemicals. They also have anti-inflammatory properties. And managing body weight. Each woman has an optimal fat distribution and amount of body fat. It varies from individual to individual, but making sure that we maintain a healthy body weight is a good way to help ward off metabolic syndrome. All right, that's all I have. Some of my final notes. The best support that you can give your clients in perimenopause and postmenopause is to build a community of like-minded health professionals around you. It builds trust and it gives women the opportunity to seek help with people that you like, know, and trust so they know that they're going to be taken care of. The number of women that we've had come into our gym saying, I don't know where to go, no one can help me, my doctor doesn't believe in perimenopause, and I can't seem to find anyone that will actually listen to my concerns is staggering. So looking for health professionals that you can work with, like a pelvic floor physio, nurse practitioner, psychologist, a naturopath, massage therapy, and a nutritionist, and somebody who specifically looks at perimenopause and hormone health through nutrition can be a nice asset to have for your clients. Thank you.
Thanks, Haley. That was great. We do have some questions in the chat, and I wasn't quite sure where to interrupt to see where was like a good fit. So I'm gonna go back up. Michael had quite a few questions. One was, how does being overweight or having higher body fat percentage affect the negative syndromes of perimenopause or menopause?
That's a good question. So being high body fat puts a lot of pressure on your pelvic floor. So it can have a lot of heavier set people can have a lot more issues with pelvic floor health. Having too much body fat going into postmenopause because the first estrogen, estrone, sorry, is produced locally in body fat. So women who are overweight may experience worse symptoms because they just have more of that low potency estrogen produced into postmenopause. Also, the more weight you carry around, the worse it is on your joints and your bones. So it can't be helpful to have, a lack of estrogen. You have really sore joints and bones, but you're carrying extra weight. That can also cause or exacerbate symptoms. Yeah, I hope that helps.
He also had, I'm gonna like combine this question, Michael, because I think it was a little bit of both. So he was wondering, is it true that women during menopause need more resistance training than men? Like, is there a difference? And then I know Monica went in and just was basically saying that resistance training is great for everybody, especially, but resistance training is probably more beneficial than like HIIT or high intensity workouts for women who are in menopause. Um,
Yeah.
but then also, Michael said, talking about some research that has said that aerobic training is more important for men in higher age than women. So in ratio to resistance training, but then like full body resistance for women is more important than aerobic training during menopause.
Yes. So the basic recommended amount of resistance training for a woman in postmenopause is at least 2 days a week of full body. And then any other aerobic activity like walking is huge. Swimming, stuff that's low impact. It totally depends on their symptoms. You have to coach the client in front of you. Women in menopause, there's nothing wrong with doing HIIT training. High intensity sprints can actually be really good for their heart health. However, again, you have to coach the client in front of you because a lot of women that experience a decline in estrogen, they can't tap into their nervous system as well as they used to be able to. So a lot of prolonged sprint or endurance training can have the opposite effects and make them really tired, really sore. So we want to make sure we're coaching the person in front of us and giving them what feels good for them. You're not going to mess up anybody's hormones or cause any significant damage by exercise prescription. But if you want to play it safe, giving 2 to 4 days a week of strength training and then working on, some aerobic training like swimming, 20-minute AMRAPs, etc., whatever they can manage well and support with nutrition. As we get older, nutrition is so key. So again, you can't outwork a bad diet. When you're in postmenopause, you can't outwork a lack of nutrition and calories. So we want to make sure they're recovering really well. It's paired with training that's sustainable for them and makes them feel good.
Awesome. I have a question, and maybe, so I know majority of our coaches here use some sort of assessment. Obviously, that's what we were taught in CCP is assess, don't guess. Have you ever had to adapt, or do you adapt the assessment process to account for perimenopausal or menopausal considerations, things like that?
Always. Almost every time. Unless you have a lady come in that's like, I've been looking after myself since I was 20 years old. I have no injuries. I feel amazing. I sleep 8 to 10 hours a night, which is so unrealistic for most people. We always adapt. So some people don't squat very well. So what do? We put wedges under their feet. We have, instead of overhead squat with a dowel, they're going to be squatting with their arms crossed across their chest. Maybe they can't even lunge. So we just skip that altogether. But we get them to lie on the floor, bring their knee to their chest so we can look at their hip function and hip flexibility. So always, 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 we have a standard assessment that we use on paper, but we're always looking at the person in front of us, and we have a really long conversation first on previous injury. How does that feel? I always ask any pop, cracks, creaks, or pinching or pain. And if they say yes to any of those things, we figure out how they can do it without pain. So always, again, coaching the person in front of you and adapting as needed daily, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question in the chat. To set nourishment for women during perimenopause or menopause, is it better to reach higher protein ratio, little bit higher healthy fat income, and decrease carb consumption? If not, do you have like a best macro for their nourishment or a best like percentage?
Again, this is like a broken record. It depends on the person. If this person coming in eats 50 grams of protein a day, and that's it, or 30, we've had women come in that eat 20. Obviously, I'm not going to say they need to eat 150 grams. As we get older, I say 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight is a really good place to start if they're already used to consuming protein. In terms of carb to fat ratio, that's going to depend on what feels better for the individual in front of you. I like to use myself as an example. I eat higher carb, lower fat because I don't digest fat very well. A lot of women who are perimenopausal, postmenopausal start to find that dairy doesn't sit well. It messes with their gut health. They feel bloated. They have diarrhea. So we want to make sure that we're not forcing them to eat higher fat when carbs is actually a better option for them. I would also stress that women eat at least 130 grams of carbs a day for proper hormone function, even when they're postmenopausal. That is our main energy source. It's a hard sell for a lot of people because they are afraid of carbohydrates, but having the conversation of making sure that they have that precision nutrition, balanced plate, and that they understand they need at least, a little bit of carbohydrates if they want to start lifting weights and just to be able to function during the day. A lot of the brain fog complaints that I see are because women aren't eating enough. They don't eat enough protein and enough carbs. Most women are really good at eating fat. So focusing on those two things first, and then having that client tell you how they're feeling over time with more carbs, more fat. So again, you're just going to have to work with the individual. But yeah, most women need at least 2,000 calories a day, if not more. That's also a hard sell for a lot of people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We are at time. Are there any other questions before we sign off for Haley? I thought this was super educational. I loved learning about all of this. Uh, just lost my train of thought, sorry. But we will have our community calls on the first Thursday of every month. We are in the process of getting the next topic. So we will get that out to you guys as soon as possible. So we're always looking for people who would like to present. Haley, this was super beneficial. This is a topic that was asked for. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you everybody for joining us today. There will be a recording sent out to everybody who registered, so you guys will also get this recording. I also dropped in the slides and that pelvic floor cheat sheet in a Google Drive that is shared for anybody who has the link. So I hope that is beneficial for you guys to use with your clients. But it was great seeing everybody today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye guys. Thanks, Haley.